Can a single seat truly change an entire unjust system? What would you do if someone boldly took the seat you paid for in full simply because they believed they deserved it more than you? Would you stay silent, accept it, and tell yourself it's just a seat? Or would you stand up, not with angry shouting, but by making an entire system confront itself? That question is not just a scenario on an airplane. It is a mirror reflecting how this society sometimes decides who deserves respect and who does not. And that was the very moment that changed everything for Selena Vaughn. Selena, 45 years old, a name that had become an icon in the field of educational technology, was not the type of person who sought attention. She was known for her sharp intellect and calm decisions strong enough to shift the course of an entire industry. Yet anyone who had ever met her in person would not be impressed by awards or glowing headlines, but by her quiet confidence, her composed demeanor. Selena believed in something she called the power of silence, a costly lesson she had learned over years of working in rooms where every glance scrutinized her. A black woman, as if she were an exception. That is why she always carried herself with a proud caution, as if every action, every word was calculated so no one could ever use it against her. But this time, things were different. The moment she prepared to board that morning flight, Selena knew she carried far more than just an important speech at the New York Global Innovation Forum. That speech was not merely numbers and solutions. It was a message about the right to be respected, especially for children of color, children society often overlooked for their true potential. As her gray suitcase rolled softly across the polished stone floor of the airport, Selena looked like any other business traveler. A fitted black suit, hair neatly pinned back, steps measured and steady. But behind that composed appearance was a mind racing faster than ever. On her phone screen, a message from her nephew, Evan Vaughn, a young lawyer making waves in high-profile racial discrimination lawsuits, appeared. "Auntie, this time don't stay silent like before. You're not just holding a seat for yourself, you're holding it for all of us." Selena smiled faintly, but her eyes reflected a distant thought. She remembered 5 years ago, when something similar happened on a high-speed train. She had chosen silence. She had told herself she was too busy, that it wasn't worth fighting over. And yet, she had felt a gnawing regret when she later saw a viral video of another woman, someone who had done what Selena could not. She stood up. Selena had sworn to herself she would never let history repeat itself. And today, she did not know that just one flight, just one seat, would make her the center of a storm that would not only shake the polished luxury of a first-class cabin, but would challenge the way society itself defines the word deserving. The morning airport was bathed in a pale golden light of dawn, streaming through the large glass panels, highlighting the cold modernity of the space. Selena Vaughn sat at a cafe near the boarding gate, gently stirring a steaming cup of chamomile tea, her eyes following the slow movement of planes taxiing on the runway. She was not someone who enjoyed flying, but neither did she fear it. For Selena, every flight was a precious stretch of time to breathe, to keep her mind calm before stepping into battles that not everyone could see. And this trip, more than any before, carried a special weight. Tomorrow, at the New York Global Innovation Forum, she would stand at the podium before thousands of leaders, scholars, and policymakers. Her chosen topic was not about technology or dry revenue figures, but about children in underprivileged neighborhoods, children with sharp minds whose potential was blocked by prejudice at the very doors of their classrooms. Her speech would be a call to reform the education system, to change how society viewed human potential. We cannot talk about innovation if we continue to overlook the brightest minds simply because their last names do not fit the standard. That would be her opening line. She had written it 3 weeks ago, but still read it over and over, like a ritual before every takeoff. Her phone vibrated softly on the table. A message from Evan appeared. "Remember, this time you don't have the right to stay silent. We've been quiet for too long." Selena stared at the words for a long moment. Evan was a fighter, fiery, outspoken, uncompromising, a younger version of herself from years past. But Selena had learned to fight differently, quietly, persistently, and sometimes by simply standing her ground. She replied with a short message. "I know." Before boarding, Selena stopped by the first-class lounge, where the aroma of expensive coffee and the low hum of casual conversation among successful business travelers filled the air. Everything was perfect, yet in the fleeting glances of a few people, there was still something that made her feel scrutinized. That look was nothing new. It had followed her for decades, in boardrooms and at elegant parties, where every compliment carried a quiet undertone of doubt. Selena exhaled softly, adjusted the collar of her coat, and reminded herself, "It's fine. I've walked through hundreds of looks like this." She left the lounge when the announcement echoed, "Flight AS-1765 to New York is now boarding. First-class passengers, please proceed to Gate 21. Selena stood, tightened her grip on the handle of her suitcase, her gaze steady, every step radiating composed confidence. She did not yet know that in just a few minutes, that calm composure would become the focus of the entire world, and everything, from the suspicious glances to the urgent messages on her phone, would disappear before a single question: does she truly deserve to sit there? The first-class cabin glowed with a soft light from cleverly hidden fixtures on the ceiling, casting a warm sheen over the luxurious leather seats. Selena Vaughn walked down the narrow aisle, pulling her small ash-gray suitcase, her steps even, and her expression calm. She enjoyed the moments before takeoff, that quiet pause, as if time itself held its breath for a few minutes before the chaos of work resumed. Everything seemed perfectly in order, exactly as she preferred, until she saw her seat, 2C. A man was already sitting there, lounging as if he were in his own living room. He wore a beige blazer, high-end headphones resting loosely around his neck, a glass of red wine swirling lazily in his hand. Selena recognized him instantly. Derek Whitman. Not a friend, not a colleague. 2 years ago, he had tried to take over an educational tech project, and she had rejected him outright with words he likely never forgot. "I don't work with people who put profit above people." And today, Derek was in her seat, her name printed clearly on the ticket. Selena stopped, taking a deep breath, keeping her voice as warm and polite as possible. "Excuse me, I believe this is my seat. 2C. She pointed to the seat number, marked clearly on the frame. Derek didn't look up immediately. He only glanced at her, a smirk curling on his lips, lazily waving his hand as though swatting away an annoying fly. "Economy is back there. Maybe check again." His words came out casually, but they cut sharper than any direct insult. Selena felt something tighten in her chest, not from surprise but from familiarity. That look, that dismissive tone, she had seen it in hundreds of boardrooms. "This is my seat," she repeated, her smile unwavering. Derek finally looked up, his eyes sweeping over her from head to toe, arrogance sparking in those grey-blue eyes. "Of course, your ticket probably says that. But I sit here every week, you know. Must be a system glitch." He leaned back into the seat, adjusting his cuff as if the conversation was already over. A young flight attendant approached, petite with a name tag reading Laura Cruz. Her eyes darted between Selena and Derek, torn between duty and the fear of upsetting a frequent VIP. "Is there a problem?" Laura asked, her voice tentative. Selena replied briefly, still calm. "This is my seat." Laura turned to Derek, hesitant. "Sir, may I see your ticket, please?" Derek waved her off, not even lifting his phone. "I fly this route every week. The system must have messed up. Just find her another seat in business or something. It's not a big deal." Selena stood tall, her hand tightening slightly around the handle of her suitcase. The curious stares of other passengers began to turn toward them, whispers rippling through the cabin, a few people even lifting their phones, as if by reflex. She didn't argue further. Instead, Selena pulled out her phone, typing a short message to Evan. "It's happening again. This time, it ends." Once the message sent, she looked up, her dark eyes locking on Derek's. There was no anger, no tremor, just one thing, a quiet, unshakable resolve, waiting for the right moment to make him sit up and face the truth. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin grew heavier with every passing second. Discreet glances darted across the aisle, whispers rippled like small waves through the quiet space. Selena Vaughn stood motionless beside seat 2C, one hand resting lightly on the handle of her suitcase, her expression so calm it was almost unsettling. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice, but that silence alone tightened the air more than any shouting could. Derek Whitman, on the other hand, leaned back in the seat as if claiming ownership of it, swirling his glass of red wine lazily. He didn't even look at Selena now, just let his words hang in the air, dripping with contempt. "It's amusing how some people think they can buy their way into this section with just a ticket. Seats like this aren't meant for people like that." He didn't need to clarify, but everyone understood. Selena drew in a slow breath, the deep black of her eyes glinting with a cold light. She unlocked her phone and typed a quick message to Evan. "He just said it. We have proof. Be ready." On the other end, Evan was probably already furious, but Selena's face remained composed. She wasn't impulsive, and this time, she wanted everything to unfold perfectly, right under the spotlight. Laura Cruz, the young flight attendant, stood between them, her fingers trembling slightly as she held her notepad. Her eyes flicked nervously between Derek and Selena. "Sir, but we need to verify," she began. But Derek cut her off with a sharp, dismissive laugh. "I don't need to prove anything. I'm a platinum customer. I sit in this seat every week. Don't waste my time, sweetheart." A middle-aged man in seat 3A leaned slightly toward his wife, whispering, "She hasn't raised her voice, hasn't argued, and yet she's being treated like this." His wife nodded, her face tight with disapproval. A young passenger further back discreetly angled his phone to start recording, moving carefully to avoid drawing attention. Everyone was watching, silently, but no one spoke up. Selena turned her gaze to Laura, her voice low but firm. "I have a ticket. This is my seat. You just need to follow the rules." Laura pressed her lips together, torn between doing the right thing and the fear of angering a familiar VIP. Derek took another sip of wine and leaned forward just slightly, his voice low enough for only Selena and those closest to hear. "We all know why you're here. A little diversity quota, right? Don't pretend you actually belong in this seat." Selena didn't respond, but something in her eyes shifted. In that instant, her calm was no longer just composed. It carried a quiet authority, as if she were looking straight through Derek, past his words, into the entitlement that made him believe he could take something that wasn't his. She didn't have to say a word. Everyone around them had already heard enough to understand the real issue, and it was that silence, more than anything, that made Derek start to lose his patience. Laura finally sighed, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to call a supervisor to handle this." Derek let out another short laugh, tilting his head with mock amusement. "Go ahead. I'd love to see how this airline treats people like me." Selena remained still, back straight, eyes unwavering. Somewhere behind them, the young passenger kept recording, and in just a few hours, that video would ignite across social media like wildfire. The sound of footsteps echoed steadily across the plush carpet of the first-class cabin, each step firm and deliberate, drowning out the murmured whispers. Captain Jonathan Reeves appeared, his cap tucked neatly under one arm, his tall frame radiating an undeniable authority. More than 30 years in aviation had given him a sharp, discerning gaze. With just one sweep of the room, he took in everything. Laura Cruz standing awkwardly, Derek Whitman lounging arrogantly in the seat with an air of entitlement, and Selena Vaughn standing straight, backed, silent, yet commanding. "Is there a problem here?" His voice was low, calm, but carried enough weight to silence the cabin instantly. Laura froze for a moment, her eyes darting between Derek and Selena, clearly afraid of speaking the truth. Selena simply lifted her phone, the electronic boarding pass glowing on the screen, clearly marked with Seat 2C. "This is my seat," she said evenly. Nothing more. Jonathan gave a brief nod and turned to Derek. "Sir, I need to see your boarding pass." Derek let out a short, derisive laugh, folding his arms across his chest, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "I fly this route every week, in this very seat every week. Your system must have made a mistake. Instead of bothering me, why not find her another seat in business class? I don't want to waste my time." Jonathan's face stayed composed, but a subtle tension tightened his jaw. "Sir, we can only depart when every passenger is seated in their assigned seat. Please show me your boarding pass." Derek placed his wine glass down with deliberate slowness, as if to emphasize his annoyance, and retrieved his phone from his jacket pocket. He handed it over with an air of smug confidence. Jonathan glanced at the screen, his expression cooling instantly. "Your assigned seat is 4D, not 2C. His words were sharp, final, cutting through the argument like a blade. The cabin fell into a heavy silence. Some passengers lowered their heads, pretending to focus on their phones, though their eyes flicked up discreetly to watch. Derek scoffed, trying to salvage his pride. The system must be wrong. I'm a Platinum Executive member. I sit in 2C every week. You don't want to upset a loyal customer like me. Jonathan held his gaze, his grey eyes firm, unwavering. Today, the system is not wrong, and here, no one has more rights than anyone else. Either you take the seat assigned to you, or we will have to ask you to leave the plane. The choice is yours. The words landed like an order, crisp and cold. For the first time, Derek's usual confidence faltered, his face flushing red as his jaw tightened. With a frustrated click of his tongue, he stood abruptly, yanking his suitcase from under the seat, nearly spilling the glass of wine on the table. Leaning close to Jonathan, his voice dropped to a threatening murmur, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. You'll regret this. I sit on this airline's investment board. We'll be seeing each other again. Jonathan didn't blink, replying in an even tone. I'm doing my job, and my job is to ensure everything is done by the rules. Selena had not moved, had not spoken, but as Derek passed by, their eyes met for the briefest moment. There was no anger in her gaze, no disdain, just a calm razor. Sharp, it forced Derek to look away. It was the look of someone who knew, with absolute certainty, that the real fight was only beginning. Jonathan stepped aside, his tone softening as he turned to Selena. Ma'am, you may take your seat. We apologize for the inconvenience. Selena gave him a slight nod and a thin, composed smile. Not a smile of victory, but one of respect for his professionalism. But deep down she knew this was only the opening act to the storm that was yet to come. The low hum of the plane's engines vibrated softly beneath the first-class cabin as it gradually settled back into calm. Selena Vaughn sat down in her rightful seat, 2C, slipping off her jacket and carefully placing her grey suitcase into the overhead compartment. Her composure remained unshaken, as if the tense confrontation moments earlier had never happened. But the atmosphere around her told a different story. Passengers exchanged quiet glances. Whispers rippled through the cabin, only to fade quickly whenever a flight attendant passed by. In seat 4D, Derek Whitman leaned back, his jaw tight, his eyes burning with barely contained anger. His fingers flew across his phone, sending rapid-fire messages. Every so often, he glanced toward Selena, his gaze no longer holding just contempt, but now brimming with a simmering rage. Selena turned her head slightly, her eyes focused out the window, sunlight casting a serene glow across her face. Inside her jacket pocket, her phone buzzed gently. She pulled it out, reading a message from Evan. The video's already spreading. 120,000 views in just 10 minutes. Selena's lips curved into the faintest, almost imperceptible smile. She hadn't asked anyone to record what happened, but she knew this would happen. The truth, once revealed, always found its way to the public. The intercom crackled to life, interrupting the murmurs of the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we are experiencing an issue that requires us to return to the departure airport. We appreciate your understanding. The cabin fell into a brief, heavy silence before hushed conversations exploded. A woman in seat 3B whispered anxiously, Is this about her? Her eyes darting towards Selena. A man muttered under his breath. Of course it is. I saw a flight attendant go into the cockpit looking serious. Selena didn't turn around. She calmly fastened her seatbelt, her gaze fixed ahead. Another message from Evan flashed across her screen. Twitter is blowing up. Hashtag C2C is trending. People are demanding the airline take responsibility. Behind her, Derek finally lost control. He shot up in his seat, his voice booming loud enough for the entire first-class cabin to hear. This is ridiculous. We're turning back the whole plane over one seat. Everyone's flight delayed because someone wanted to make a scene? He pointed directly at Selena, his tone harsh and biting. She's doing this for attention. Don't think for a second she's some kind of saint. Some passengers lowered their heads, avoiding his eyes, but an elderly woman in seat 2A, who had remained silent until now, spoke up. Her voice was slow but firm, carrying through the cabin. She hasn't done anything wrong. If someone pays for their seat, they have every right to sit there. That's all. The cabin fell quiet again. Derek's face flushed, his jaw clenched as he muttered something under his breath, but for the moment, he had no retort. Selena turned to the older woman and gave a small nod, a silent gesture of gratitude. Inside, Selena knew this had gone far beyond a single seat. A storm was forming, and no one on this plane could stop it now. The decision to turn back wasn't just about resolving a seating issue. It was the airline's unspoken admission that things had already spiraled out of control. As the plane began to descend, sunlight shimmered across the metallic wing outside her window. Selena's lips moved slightly, her words barely audible, spoken only for herself. All right then, let's begin. The plane slowly taxied back to the departure airport, the heavy hum of its engines mirroring the tense atmosphere inside the cabin. When the doors finally opened, the soft yellow lights of the terminal spilled in, cold and stern. A group of airline security personnel stood waiting just beyond the jet bridge, their expressions tight with caution. Selena Vaughn remained seated in 2C, unhurried and composed. She unfastened her seatbelt with measured grace, adjusted the collar of her jacket, and stood with a calm, steady gaze, as though everything unfolding had been expected. Derek Whitman, however, was a stark contrast. He shot up from his seat, pushing past other passengers, his voice sharp with anger. This is insane! You're wasting everyone's time over a tiny misunderstanding. This is an insult to a loyal customer like me. He jabbed a finger in Selena's direction, his tone turning accusatory. She's the one who should be escorted off, not me. But this time, no one supported him, nor did they look away. Several passengers exchanged disapproving glances, and hushed murmurs rose. He's going too far. What a disgrace. A flight attendant approached Selena, speaking softly. Ms. Vaughn, please, they've asked you to disembark first. The airline's management would like to speak with you directly. Selena gave a single nod and stepped into the aisle, her movements deliberate and unhurried. Outside, Martin Carraway, the airline's regional executive, was waiting. He wore a perfectly pressed grey suit, holding a tablet in one hand, his professional smile faltering slightly under a trace of worry in his eyes. Ms. Vaughn, Martin began quickly as Selena approached. We sincerely apologize for this inconvenience. This was entirely an unfortunate error. As a gesture of goodwill, we'd like to provide you with a private jet to New York immediately. No formalities required. Additionally, you'll receive a year-long unlimited flight voucher with all our routes. His words tumbled out. His practiced smile stretched tight. Selena listened, her dark eyes fixed steadily on him, so calm it made him shift uncomfortably. "A private jet," she repeated, her tone slow, deliberate. Martin nodded eagerly. "Yes, we want to ensure you experience no further inconvenience." Selena tilted her head slightly, a faint smile curling at her lips, not one of gratitude, but of quiet reproach. "Mr. Carraway, I don't need a private jet. I need an explanation. And more importantly, I need to know what your airline will do to make sure this doesn't happen to anyone else." Martin hesitated, his eyes darting to the staff standing nearby. Before he could answer, Derek's voice erupted behind them, loud and defiant. "Don't listen to her. She's just trying to play the victim for attention. I know her type." The words hung heavy in the air, and the terminal fell silent. Selena turned to look at Derek. Her expression wasn't angry or scornful, just a steady, unflinching gaze that seemed to cut through him, exposing the arrogance behind his words. "Mr. Whitman," she said, her voice slow but clear, carrying to every corner of the waiting area. "This isn't about me, it's about someone believing they have more right to a seat than others simply because of their social standing or the color of their skin. And the way you're behaving right now says everything everyone here needs to know." Soft murmurs swept through the crowd, a few people nodding in agreement. Derek froze, his face flushed crimson, his lips pressed tightly together as if struggling to contain his anger. Selena didn't look at him again. She turned back to Martin. "I'll wait for an official response from you. But understand this. I don't intend to let this be buried." Martin swallowed hard and nodded quickly, his usual executive confidence replaced with unease. Selena turned and walked across the terminal, neither fast nor slow. Each step seemed to press deeper into the thick silence that had overtaken the room. And in that moment, everyone watching understood. This was no longer about a seat on a plane. This was the beginning of something much bigger. The top-floor conference room of the airline's headquarters glowed under cold white lights, the glass walls reflecting the city skyline outside, a display of luxury meant to project authority. Selena Vaughn stepped inside, her posture straight, a charcoal grey coat draped neatly over her shoulders. Around the long table, senior executives sat in tense silence, laptops open, their faces a mix of apprehension and restraint. At the center sat Martin Carraway, his expression carefully composed, though the strain showed beneath the surface. "Ms. Vaughn," Martin began, his voice deliberately polite, "we sincerely apologize. The board convened an emergency meeting through the night. We hope to resolve this matter internally and prevent it from escalating further. The airline is prepared to offer significant compensation, as well as a public apology, should you agree." Selena listened quietly, her hands clasped lightly in front of her, her gaze steady as it swept across each person in the room. When Martin finished, she spoke, her voice low yet clear enough to resonate against the sterile walls. "Mr. Carraway, I'm not here for money, and I'm not here for an apology crafted just to calm the media. I'm here for change." The room fell into a brief silence, a few executives glancing at her with unease. Martin frowned slightly. "And what kind of change are you asking for?" Selena reached into her bag, retrieving a thick stack of documents. She placed it on the table with a soft but weighty thud that commanded attention. "This," she said, sliding the documents toward Martin, "is what I call the Vaughn Standard, a comprehensive set of guidelines to rebuild your customer service system from the ground up. It doesn't stop at employee retraining. It requires independent oversight, regular audits, and the public release of results. If you truly want this airline to regain its dignity, you start here." Martin flipped through a few pages, his eyes narrowing slightly at the strict, uncompromising clauses. A woman seated across the table, Naomi Reed, known for her strong influence on the board, spoke up. "Ms. Vaughn, you're asking us to overhaul an entire global system because of a single personal incident. This is a multinational organization. We can't just react to pressure from one viral event." Selena turned to Naomi, her eyes sharp but her tone unwavering. "Mrs. Reed, this isn't about me. This is about a system that allowed someone like Mr. Whitman to behave the way he did for as long as he has, unchecked. And if you truly believe this isn't serious enough to warrant change, then perhaps the public deserves to know exactly where your priorities lie." The words landed heavily, pulling the room into silence. Martin inhaled deeply, his glance shifting briefly toward Naomi before returning to Selena. "We need time to review this." Selena gave a single, measured nod and rose from her seat. Her gaze swept over the entire room, her final words calm but laced with steel. "You have 48 hours. If I don't get an answer, this will no longer be just a viral video. It will become a global investigation into how this airline treats its passengers." She gathered her documents and turned to leave, her heels striking a steady rhythm against the polished floor. The air in the room grew heavier in her wake. Selena knew that from this moment forward, they had no other choice, either change or face a crisis unlike anything they had ever experienced. 2 days after that historic meeting, the name Selena Vaughn appeared across the front pages of major newspapers, not in the usual business sections, but on the headlines with bold letters. "The woman who made the entire airline industry change." Within just 48 hours, the hashtag #HatchedSeat2C remained the #1 trending topic worldwide. Millions shared the short video of Selena standing silently beside seat 2C, her expression calm, but her eyes unwavering, a striking contrast to Derek Whitman's aggression. The world watched, and outrage erupted. Questions flooded social media. How many times has this happened without anyone filming it? How many people were forced to give up their seats just because they didn't look like the familiar passengers? Morning talk shows buzzed with heated discussions among sociologists, lawyers, and even former flight attendants. One host delivered a statement that made the studio audience applaud in unison. She didn't need to shout, she didn't need to cause a scene, yet she forced the entire world to look at something that happens every single day. Meanwhile, inside the airline, an unprecedented wave began to rise. Hundreds of employees started sending anonymous emails, sharing similar incidents they had witnessed. Laura Cruz, the young flight attendant from that day, made a bold decision. She appeared in a live interview, her voice trembling, but her eyes resolute. I stayed silent that day because I was afraid of losing my job. But now I realize my silence was part of the problem. I apologize to Ms. Vaughn, and I apologize to every passenger who has had to endure this. Her confession spread rapidly, becoming the focal point of a growing movement demanding transparency in the airline service industry. And Derek Whitman, the man who had shown Selena the most disdain, could not escape the mounting pressure. Under the weight of media scrutiny and public outrage, he was forced to issue a short, public statement. I apologize for my behavior. I was wrong. But what drew more attention was what he did afterward. Without press conferences or promotional conditions, Derek quietly donated a significant sum to a scholarship fund founded by Selena to support education. Some speculated it was just a PR move to salvage his reputation, but Selena did not care. What mattered were the real effects. The scholarship would give hundreds of children a chance at an education. In major cities, other airlines began announcing new policies to demonstrate fairness in their services. Many even reached out to Selena, requesting permission to adopt the Vaughn standard as part of their staff training programs. Within weeks, these changes extended beyond the airline industry, influencing hotels, restaurants, and even public service organizations. Selena followed all of this from her small apartment in New York. In the soft glow of the afternoon light, she sat by the window, holding a cup of chamomile tea. Her phone buzzed continuously with messages of gratitude from strangers. A single mother who had been treated fairly when booking a hotel room. A student accepted into an internship program after being previously rejected for not fitting the image. Selena smiled faintly. She didn't need titles or awards. What she wanted had already begun to take shape. A world where people were respected not because they resembled someone else, but because they were simply human. That afternoon, the main hall of the Global Aviation Equity Conference in New York was filled to capacity. Warm golden lights spilled over the stage, reflecting off rows of seats occupied by significant figures, executives of major airlines, lawmakers, customer service experts, and people who had once been victims of discrimination. The atmosphere was so silent it felt almost sacred as Selena Vaughn stepped onto the stage, her charcoal gray suit perfectly tailored, her face calm, but her eyes blazing with a determination that could not be hidden. She carried no script, no teleprompter. Her voice rose slowly, steady and commanding. There is a difference between sitting in a seat and being seen as worthy of that seat. When I boarded that flight, all I wanted was to get to New York to deliver a speech. But I was forced to confront a much larger question. Who is allowed to exist comfortably in this space, and who is not? The hall was so quiet that the scratch of pens writing in notebooks could be heard. Selena continued, her tone dropping lower, carrying a weight of emotion. We cannot talk about excellent service if the unspoken rules allow someone to confidently take another person's seat simply because they believe they are more deserving. Silence can kill justice, and we have allowed it to happen for far too long. But today, that must end. She paused, her gaze sweeping across the rows of airline executives, where Martin Carraway sat alongside Naomi Reed. I'm not standing here to tell a personal story. I am standing here for the thousands, for the millions of passengers who had no camera to capture their experiences, no hashtag to protect them. And I have one question for you. Who is still not allowed to sit where they belong? who is still being asked to give up their seat in silence? And what will you do the next time it happens? For a few seconds, silence lingered, heavy and electric, before the room erupted in applause. It was not the polite clapping typical of high-profile conferences, but a surge of genuine emotion, applause born from hearts that had just been awakened. Many stood, some wiped away tears. Naomi Reed, who had opposed Selena in the boardroom, stood as well, giving a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement. When the conference ended, Selena stepped off the stage and walked down the long hallway toward the large glass doors. Outside, the New York skyline glowed in a fiery sunset, reflecting off glittering skyscrapers. She stopped for a moment, looking out over the bustling city below. Her phone buzzed softly in her pocket, a message from Evan. "You did it. But this is only the beginning." Selena smiled, typing back. "Yes, just the beginning." That evening, on an ordinary flight home, Selena sat by the window, dressed in a simple grey sweater. No one paid her any special attention. No cameras pointed her way. A young flight attendant smiled warmly and asked if she wanted more tea. Selena nodded gently, a faint smile on her lips. She leaned back against her seat, gazing out at the sky darkening to deep blue, and whispered to herself, "We deserve this seat. All of us." The plane trembled lightly as it pierced through a thin layer of clouds, leaving behind fading streaks of sunset. A new chapter was beginning, not just for Selena Vaughn, but for everyone who had ever been forced to step back in silence. And from now on, every seat would no longer be just a seat. It would stand as a reminder that respect is not a privilege, but a basic right for every human being. A social expert once said, "The greatest changes do not begin with shouting, but with the moments when someone dares to stand firmly in the place that is rightfully theirs." Selena Vaughn proved that. Silent, yet powerful enough to force an entire system to look at itself in the mirror. If you believe that respect is not a privilege, but a right for every human being, hit like and subscribe to help share inspiring stories like this, and leave a comment with the 3 words, "Deserve this seat," because no one should ever have to fight just to sit where they rightfully belong.